StrayAllDay.com.
You are now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you expected to achieve has yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative. That is the go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques underneath the umbrella of one unified philosophy that is called work on your game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is triggering the phenomenon. But before we get into that, let me give you two housekeeping points. Number one, my daily motivation text and also my Monday motivation text come out every week, every day and every week, respectively. Guaranteed to have you focus, sharp, and on point to start your day or your week. All you got to do to receive those is text me at my number 305-384-6894. Once we get those texts going again, then you'll be getting those messages straight to your phone on a consistent basis, as I just described. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. That's the place where I do all my coaching. That's the place where if you want to go deeper with me and get my direct help, that is the only way to do it. All you got to do is go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can see a layout of what our entire program looks and sounds like and feels like. You can see some feedback from others who we have and are working with right now. And you can schedule a time to get on a call so we can talk about your situation and how we can help you get from where you are to where you want to go. That is all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. With that out the way, let's get into this topic, which again is triggering the phenomenon. Now, this is one subject that you have heard me before say things like, I got this idea from this person. I heard somebody say this, and I took the idea, then I fleshed it out, and I'm going to make it into a whole thing. Even though they may have said one line, I'm going to make it into a whole masterclass. This one is a little bit different because, yes, I got this idea from someone else. I'm giving complete thanks and respect to a guy by the name of Dan Kennedy. He's an old marketing, copywriting, sales, and business guy who's been around for a long time. Dan Kennedy's probably in his 70s these days and pretty much, for the most part, retired from business. So don't go trying to find him on Instagram. You're not going to find him. You'll find people talking about him, but you're not going to find him. But he's the one who put flesh to this whole concept of the phenomenon. And he even went and copyrighted the whole concept called the phenomenon. It's literally called the phenomenon. He went and copyrighted this whole thing. And I'm doing this only because Dan himself doesn't have a podcast, at least not one that he actually does himself. And again, there are podcasts using his stuff, but it's not actually his. He would never put it into this format. So I'm going to do what he would not do in talking about this here today. So as I said, while there are many times where I will tell you that I got an idea from someone and I'm completely fleshing it out, I am doing that again today because I am not going to just say everything that Dan Kennedy said. I'm going to take some of the high level points of what he says about the phenomenon, and I am going to discuss them. But of course, it's going to be in my own words and from my own perspective. But I got to give full credit to Dan Kennedy for this concept because he literally has copyrighted this concept. So I just want to make sure that any of you want to learn more about Dan Kennedy, you can find his programs, the stuff that he's created. He has a company called Magnetic Marketing that you can find. It still is out there. Again, he's not actively doing it himself, but it is out there. It is doing stuff. And I'm actually a paying member of the Magnetic Marketing community. And I want to make sure he's getting full credit for what I'm about to share here today. Because again, as I said, for the third time, he has copyrighted this concept. So nobody over there, I don't want to get sued by anybody because I'm talking about the phenomenon that Dan Kennedy has copyrighted. So that's the only reason I'm giving this disclaimer here. So with all that out the way, shout out to Dan Kennedy. Let's get into this topic, which again is triggering the phenomenon. So first of all, let's get clear on what the phenomenon actually means. Because I mean, you heard the phrase, but what does it mean? This is point number one. Concept of the phenomenon is, according to Mr. Kennedy, achieving more in the next 12 months than you have achieved in the previous 12 years. Or you can swipe in any time frame you want. Achieving more in the next month than you did in the last year, or achieving more in the next 10 months than you did in the previous 10 years. Swipe out whatever numbers you want. The whole concept is condensing time and getting a whole lot more returns in a short period of time than you got in the previous long period of time. That's what the phenomenon is about. Okay. Long story short, again, achieving a whole lot in a short period compared to a much longer period. Now, who would not want to do that? I think everybody listening to this wants to do this. And the challenge of doing it is that many of us just hope that it happens, or we think that if it does happen, it happens randomly or magically, and there's nothing that we can do to actually trigger it and make it happen. There's nothing we can do like as far as input wise or consciously or intentionally that makes this occur? Well, Dan Kennedy says there is a way to actually make it happen. There's a way to actually trigger this. That's why the title of this episode is literally Triggering the Phenomenon. So when he put flesh to this, he said you can trigger it through intentional behavior so that you can, for example, 10x or 100x your returns, i.e., the money you make, the number of customers you get, the amount of whatever it is you're trying to 10x or 100x, whatever it is. You can do this on purpose. You don't have to wait for it to randomly happen or hope that it randomly happens. So if you're a person who's already earning, let's just say, for example, 6 figures per year, multiply that amount by 10, and imagine making that much in a year and then doing it more than once. How would your life change? So if you're making $150,000 a year, imagine if you went to making $1.5 million a year. Would that change your life in some ways? Or imagine if you were making $150,000 per year. So over the last 10 years, you've earned $1.5 million combined. Imagine if you start earning $1.5 million every quarter, where you are earning $6 million a year. Would that change your life in some ways if that just started happening? I would assume that that would lead to significant changes in anyone's life if you were able to do something like that. And I think you would agree. So I think this is the kind of change, and these are the kind of changes, because we know changes always happen in life. These are the kind of changes that all of us would be very happy to have happen, right? So the question now is not whether or not you would enjoy this. The question is, how do we actually do it? So this first point was just establishing what the phenomenon is and how it looks and how it feels and what would happen there. And now, as we move on in this masterclass, how do you actually make this happen? That's what we're going to cover in the following points. Point number 2, today's topic, once again, is triggering the phenomenon. Number 2, now through reading Dan Kennedy's work, I have read a lot of Dan Kennedy's stuff. He has several books out there. He has books that are under the No BS header. So if you go on Amazon or iBooks or wherever you get your books, and you just type in No BS, N-O space BS, like no bullshit, no BS. Dan Kennedy's whole line of books are all under this no BS framing. He has probably about 20, 30 books. I don't know how many he has. He has a lot. So look up no BS. And there's a bunch of other materials. Again, being that I am a customer and a client of the Dan Kennedy world, I have read and consumed a lot of his material, a bunch of his courses, a lot of his trainings, a lot of his, I've learned from a lot of his disciples and such, one of them being Russell Brunson, who is very much active. Russell Brunson is about my age. He's very much active in the marketing world. He runs the ClickFunnels company, and he is a disciple of Dan Kennedy's teachings. So I've gone through a lot of Dan Kennedy's stuff, which you can only get by being on the inside of his world, because he's not an internet guy. So you're not going to find him on any social media platforms. If you see Dan Kennedy on social media, again, somebody else is taking his stuff and putting it up, but he is not a social media user. He is actively not a social media user. So anyway, to get into point number 2, reading through his material and listening through and studying through Kennedy's material, which I have done, I understand the gist of how to trigger the phenomenon. Again, this is coming from what he says himself. I read about this from over the course of about 10 years. I have this book called, what is it called? It's called Dan Kennedy Diamond Faxes. I have it right here on my shelf behind me. And Dan Kennedy still has technically, again, he doesn't actively run it, but he still has a membership group where entrepreneurs can sign up, and every week he writes a fax. Now, I think he does actually send this by fax, because he's not an big internet guy at all, let alone social media. It's not even internet, period. He actually communicates by fax. So if you were a member of Dan Kennedy's membership, or you were a private client of his, you literally could not call him on the phone. You could not text message him. You could not email him. You had to send a fax message to him with whatever it is that you wanted and needed. And he told you what his schedule was for reading and replying to faxes. So you had an expectation of when you would hear back from him. And just to give you a hint, it was not immediate. So that's the way that he did his business. And he, every week, for his members, certain level members, he would write maybe a 1 or 2 page fax where he was just basically giving people some insights about marketing, about business, about mindset, about success, about achievement, productivity, etc. And he combined all those faxes over the course of about 10 years, from I think maybe 2010 to 2019, something like that. He took each one of those faxes and he would send out every Monday. So every Monday he would send out this fax. The same way that some of us send out emails every specific amount of time, he would send out a fax. He put all those faxes together into one book. And I have that book. And that book is a book that, again, you had to be inside his world in order to get the book. There was no other way to get the book. So in reading that book, he had a couple of faxes where he talked about the phenomena. I've heard him talk about it in multiple places, but this is the first place I heard him talk about was this. And the gist of triggering the phenomena, now that I'm finally giving it to you, is applying the 10x concept to everything that you're currently doing. Now, there are many people who talk about 10x in their work, probably hundreds of people who talk about 10x this and 10x that in different industries, etc. There are people who talk about 10x when it comes to real estate, marketing, sales, athletics, and everything. The good news is, even though there are many different people using the phrase 10x and the concept of 10x, they are all using it in the exact same way. So that's the good part about this, is that there's no riddle to the 10x concept. 10x literally means 10x. X just means your thing, and 10x, any of you remembers algebra class, putting the 10 next to the x means you're multiplying. That means take x, which whatever it is, the thing that you have going on, and multiply it by 10. And if you do that to multiple areas of wherever in your life you're trying to create this phenomena, then that's how you trigger it. That's one of the ways that you get it ready to go. So let's just say you're doing marketing, for example. You're in the marketing space, or you're marketing your products and your services, and you want to trigger the phenomena. So you want to apply 10x to everything you're doing marketing wise, which means if right now you have 2 ad campaigns going, now you're going to 10x that, and you're going to have 20 ad campaigns going. If right now you're usually making 5 sales calls a day, instead you're going to start making 50 sales calls a day. If you're usually reaching out to your audience once a week, now you're going to reach out to them 10 times per week. You see how that works? So triggering the phenomenon is upping your activity, 10xing your activity. Simple as that. Take everything you're doing, multiply by 10. So if you're used to running one campaign, run 10. You're used to spending $2 to acquire a customer, spend 20. You're publishing once a week, publish 10 times per week. You have a problem and you come up with 3 possible solutions to your problem, and then you try solution number 1, then solution number 2, then solution number 3. Instead, come up with 30 solutions and start implementing all 30 at the same time until you find the one that works. You see how this can help you probably get to a solution a lot faster, or get to whatever outcome you're looking for a lot faster because you have upped your level of activity? The purpose of the 10x, as Dan Kennedy describes it, is to give yourself more chances to win and to collapse timeframes. So you want to give yourself more chances to win, and you want to do it faster, both at the same time. But don't you think that would probably help you get better results than what you're getting right now? If you just gave yourself more opportunities to win, and you were getting to your outcomes faster, would that help? In other words, you want to get more done in less time. But again, is anybody opposed to that concept? Let me also ask you, where have you heard that concept before? See, the reason that the triggering of the phenomenon caught my eye and caught my ear is because many of the things that Dan Kennedy talks about in triggering the phenomenon are things that I've talked about to you before in different ways for different reasons and from different angles. But the principles of achieving success, folks, are universal. This is why you'll hear someone like Dan Kennedy or someone like myself or Russell Brunson or myriad other people who are talking about certain concepts and achieving certain outcomes. You're going to notice a lot of similarities in the things that they say versus the things that other people say, because the principles of success are universal. They do not change. From 30 years ago to 70 years ago to 25 years from now, the principles will be the same. The people will be different. The language will be different. The way we deliver things will change, but the principles do not change. This is why you can go back to stuff that is quote unquote old, stuff from years ago and generations ago, and the material is still useful. Why? Because the principles are the same. Only thing that changes is the language and the delivery and the style. So it might feel fresh to you because a quote unquote new way of doing it came out, but the principles are always going to be the same. I talked about this in episode 2747. Old does not equal bad, and new does not equal better necessarily. Just because something new does not mean it's better. It's usually, again, if there's any substance to it, it's the same substance that existed 50 years ago when your parents were your age. And just because something is old does not mean it's not useful. It just means you may not be as excited to dig into it because your brain has been warped to believe that new just necessarily means better. But the principles of success are right there available to you. And there's probably less competition to get access to the older stuff because most people are chasing around the new thing. Where's the opportunity, everybody? Opportunity is in the opposites, always. So again, the purpose of 10X is to collapse timeframes. You've heard me talk about that many times. Talk about it all the time. And many people who talk about creating success in life talk about it as well. I've heard Andrew Tate. I listen to his, I would not listen, but I read his emails. I'm on his email list. He emails pretty consistently. And he often talks about collapsing timeframes. Dan Kennedy talks about collapsing timeframes. Kobe Bryant, when he was talking about basketball, talked about collapsing timeframes. Every person who talks about success, who has any level of competence, will mention on some level collapsing timeframes, which means getting more done in less time. And how do we do it? So you hear somebody talking about, well, I can get things done on my own time and at my own pace, and whenever I get around to it, and I don't have to rush through it. Bullshit. Success is about getting things done now and getting things done fast. Why? Because human beings have a limited amount of time. So if you're taking your time and you're okay with going slow with getting something, you are going against the grain of reality, which is that you're going to die. So how are you going to take your time knowing that your time is limited? That doesn't make any sense. You want to look for ways to do things faster. You want to collapse time frames. You want to get something done that you thought would take 10 years. You want to get it done in 1 year. Why? Because you might not make it 10 years. You might not make it 1 year. So you want to get things done as quickly as possible. Collapsing time frames is a huge aspect. It's a huge principle when it comes to any level of success in any industry. Male, female, black, white, young, old, doesn't matter what you're doing. Entrepreneur or not, athlete or not, celebrity or not, famous or not. You want to create success, you always want to look to collapse time frames. How can I get triple the outcome in half the time? Always. There is no flip side to this. Zero. So many people talk about creating success. You will notice that we all say we're talking about the same stuff. Again, we just find different ways to talk about it. Even when we're talking about the same stuff that we say, we find different ways to talk about it. And here's what you need to understand. Since so many people talk about success, all talk about the same principles, you should mandate that these principles get deployed as quickly as possible. This is the reason why you hear me talk about principles all the time. I'd say principles, strategies, tactics. Many people get caught up in the tactics, which is the lowest level of deployment of any type of activity when you're trying to be successful. You need to figure out what are the strategies that govern those tactics and what are the principles that are directing the strategies. When you understand the principles, it doesn't matter what tactics you use. If you don't understand the principles, it also doesn't matter what tactics you use. When you understand the principles, you will usually end up in the right place if you're following them. If you don't understand the principles, you can have all the tactics in the world, you're not going to get to your outcome. You're going to be very tired, you're going to be fatigued, you're going to feel like you've been working really hard, and you are, but you're not going to get to your outcome because you don't have any guiding principles. Collapsing time frame is a guiding principle for success. In case anybody didn't catch it. Okay. So everyone from authors to athletes to coaches to speakers to marketers in every industry talks about achieving more results in less time by upping your inputs to give yourself a chance for increased outputs. I will go as far as to say, I already said this is not a theory, this is a principle. Meaning it is etched in stone and there is no flip side. There is no reverse to this concept. There's no pushback to this concept. There's no other way of looking at this. Any questions? Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is triggering the phenomenon. Number 3, the biggest impediment to triggering the phenomenon. And again, Dan Kennedy said this himself. I saw him say this in an email maybe about a week ago from when I'm recording this, rather. He said the biggest impediment is people's preconceived beliefs about what they can't do, what's not possible, or what you are unwilling to try regarding this 10X concept. So if you're used to reaching out to your audience once a week, and I say, all right, now you want to reach out to your audience 10 times a week, the biggest challenge people have is, well, I can't do that. I can't reach out to my audience 10 times a week. I can't send an email. I can't send 10 emails a week. That means there's only 7 days in a week, right? That means I got to send 2 emails a day, 3 times in a week to get to 10. How am I going to do that? Why would I do that? That's overwhelming. People are going to get tired of me. People are going to get mad because I'm emailing too often. Notice how all these are just objections to why you can't apply 10X. Notice that? This is what slows people down and keeps people from being successful. As soon as you tell them, here's what we can do to create your success, the first thing they do is tell you why they can't do it, why it won't work, why it is unreasonable, and why they should just keep doing the same thing that they've always been doing. Well, mofo, if doing the same thing you've always been doing is all you need to be successful, why are we having a conversation? You should say that to yourself. What I just said is what you need to say to you. Forget about me saying it to you. You need to say it to you. Because everybody who I talk to is looking to achieve more success than what they've achieved up to this point. That doesn't mean you haven't achieved any success up to this point. It means you want to achieve more success. Being the top 10% of income earners in America means you need to earn at least $130,000 per year. I work with people who, almost everybody I work with is earning at least that much, and every single one of them wants to earn more. So it's not that they're unsuccessful. They just want to be more successful. And to be more successful, something on the left side of the equation has to change in order for the right side of the equation to change. Again, I'm no algebra expert, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works. When you want to change something on the right side of the equal sign, you got to change something on the left side of the equal sign. It doesn't just change miraculously by itself. You got to do something. Does everybody agree with this concept? What slows most people down are your preconceived beliefs about what you can't do, what's not possible, or what you are unwilling to do. And again, these usually come in the forms of, let me help you out. Let me give you some language here, and you can check yourself if you are guilty of using this language. I can't. That's not possible. I've never seen anybody else do that. It's too much. It's too hard. I don't want to. I don't feel like it, etc. How many of you are guilty of using that language? Some of you have used that language already today, and the day just started. This is blocking you from triggering the phenomenon. You can't get 10x results from anything you're doing because of all these beliefs you have in your mind about what you can't do, about what's unreasonable. It was I believe it was a book called The 10x Rule by Grant Cardone that I read him say this very thing. He said, if you're going to use the 10x rule, he just called it the 10x rule. Again, he's another person talking about 10x, but they all mean it the same way. He said, you can't consider, and he started listing out here like 20 actions you can do if you want to start using the 10x rule in your life. And before he gave the list, he prefaced it by saying, you can't look at the things on this list and say, oh, well, that's unreasonable, or that's not logical, or that doesn't make sense. He said, don't ask yourself if they're reasonable or logical, because that thought is the very thing that's slowing you down from doing this in the first place. That's the reason you're reading the damn book, so that you can stop doing the same things you've been doing. He didn't say all that part, but he did say, don't question whether these things are reasonable or not. Do them anyway. That's pretty much what he said. You read the book for yourself. When you hear me mention a book, just go buy it. Or you hear me mention an author, just go buy everything they have. That's a principle for you as well. So this, I can't, it's not possible, it's too much, I've never seen anybody else do that, it's too hard, I don't feel like it, I don't want to, who cares? I mean, really, who cares? Who cares that you can't, or you think you can't? Who cares if you don't feel like it? Again, if you want to get something that you haven't had before, of course, you got to take some different actions. Everybody understands that on a practical level. But then when it comes time to actually do it, things change. So, and we all have our own pet phrases, some more than others, some we use more than others. When challenged with the concept of doing something that's outside of your normal mode of operation. Remember that when you're trying to create success that is outsized from your current standard, you're going to have to do some things that are going to push you out of your comfort zone, outside of your normal realm of behavior. That's the only way you can achieve an outcome. You can't achieve an outcome doing the same stuff you've always done. It doesn't happen that way. All you need to do to get to a much higher level of success is just keep doing the same stuff. Well, just keep doing it. All right, then you would already have the stuff. You already be there, right? The 10x concept is about stepping up your level of output and effort on purpose. The question is not whether or not this can work. That's not the question. It's a principle, which means it absolutely works. The question is whether or not you're willing to do the things necessary to make it work, i.e., doing those 10x things, even though it is outside the realm of what you think is normal, necessary, or acceptable, possible, etc. So what? You don't think it's acceptable, possible, normal, or necessary? Do it anyway. This is the challenge. That's the hump that people have to get over mentally. It's not any of the other stuff that I said. It's that part right there. While you're thinking about that, let me recap today's class. It says triggering the phenomenon, again, complete. Thanks and respect to Dan Kennedy. He's the one who came up with and copyrighted this concept. Number one, concept of the phenomenon is about achieving more in the next 12 months than you have in the previous 12 years, or swap out whatever number you want. Phenomenon is about achieving a whole lot more outcome in a much shorter period of time than you ever have in your life. Number two, reading through Dan's works, I understand the gist of the triggering the phenomenon is adding the 10x concept or applying the 10x concept to multiple aspects of any area of your life. So if you want to get 10x, or not 10x, but you want to trigger the phenomenon when it comes to your fitness, Look at every aspect of your fitness and apply the 10x. So when it comes to your money, when it comes to your business, when it comes to your customers, when it comes to whatever, look at every aspect of that area of your life and apply the 10x concept, which is 10x more ideas, 10x more implementation, 10x more speed, all of those things. It is all about collapsing time frames, more outcomes in less time. Number three, biggest impediment to triggering the phenomenon is the preconceived beliefs people have about what they cannot do, what is not possible, or what you are unwilling to do regarding this 10x mandate. I can't, it's not possible, it's too much, I don't feel like it, it's no, it doesn't seem to make sense. All right, despite all of those things that you believe, and I'm not questioning whether you believe them or not, I think people really do believe them. So what? Do it anyway. That's your mindset. Do it anyway. All you need to do to get to a much higher level is keep doing the same stuff, and you'd already be at that much higher level. Since you and we are not there, then that means something's going to have to change about the behaviors. I mean, this is just deductive reasoning. All that said, folks, text me, see you in my community. Numbers down below in the description. Also, Work on Your Game University. You want help with being held accountable to applying these things that will trigger the phenomenon, applying these 10x concepts, or figuring out where and how you can apply the 10x concept in your specific situation. Go to workonyourgameuniversity.com. You can schedule a time to get on a call with me or someone on our team. We'll talk about where you're at, where you want to go, what you feel like might be in your way. We believe we can help you, tell you how it works, what it looks like, and how we get what it looks like and how we get started. That's all at workonyourgameuniversity.com. If you want to have me as your direct coach, that is the way to do it. Work on your game. Dre, all